All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm Erin Hagar. As Michelle mentioned, I work in the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. Hand it over to Isabell if you want to introduce yourself quickly, and then we'll kind of present the structure of what we're doing today.
Sure. I'm an associate professor in the graduate school. I teach and direct the science communication program, and I also run the UMB Writing Center together with my colleague James Wright, who's also in the presentation today. So shout out to James, who's met with us a few times, and we've all been inundated with information about ChatGPT. So I'm excited to share this with you today, and the what we know, what we found out, and where we think we might need to go, should go, and so on.
Yes, thank you. Yes, absolutely. I think inundation is absolutely the word. And so we're excited. One thing I love about working in higher ed is just the way that we approach these big issues with curiosity and in a sense of community. And we're so grateful to Michelle for leading this online learning community because it gives us a wonderful platform as we kind of link arms and explore this together. And also want to acknowledge James's contribution to this, and also Christina DiMichele, who provided some wonderfully informative slides around this. The whole education community has been so generous about sharing information and approaches, so we're certainly not in this alone. So I wanted to open with kind of a high level overview about my experience with how higher education has made changes in the past, kind of changes to what I consider our educational landscape, our geography. So I've been working in faculty centers for teaching and learning since the late 90s. And in my experience, the way that our profession, our world has embraced change has really been kind of a slow erosion process to this. So there'll be something that appears, say, a new technology or a new strategy, maybe a suite of tools. And there's some healthy skepticism, right? And that's part of our process as scholars and thinkers in our fields. But there are also typically some early adopters, some people who are like, I'll be willing to give this a try. And those early adopters share their experience. They produce some scholarship, some research, give some presentations. We learn a little bit more about, what this tool might do or what this approach might do for us. We get a few more adopters, more people trying it out, different disciplines, different approaches. And over time, say, 5 or 10 years later, we look up and we see that our landscape has changed, much like this rock formation has changed over the years, right? It doesn't mean that we might have 100% adoption of something like online teaching or flipped classrooms, whatever it might be. But we walk around this landscape and we're not surprised by it anymore. I see this evolution of AI and ChatGPT as a different kind of change to our landscape. Much more like it's coming out of nowhere. I don't know if anyone else has felt like this. I use this image not because I think this is a destructive feeling, although it may feel that way right now to some of us. We may have a lot of questions around that, but really it's more the immediacy of something like an asteroid hitting our geography, because I don't know about you, but up until October, November, I didn't know this, I'd heard artificial intelligence. I know the way that we use it right now, but a tool like ChatGPT was not even on my radar. And this is the professional landscape in which I operate. And it felt like all of a sudden by November, December, it was all we were hearing about. And I think one of the reasons that it has already had such an impact and why we see, our attendance numbers today, we see so many news articles about it, things like that, is because it isn't just like someone invented a new kind of discussion board, right? It's a tweak to a tool that we already know existed. I think the reason why this is garnering so much interest is because what this tool does invites us as educators to really answer some existential questions about what it is that we do. How do we know what we know, right? That's one of the questions a tool like this invites us to consider. How do we know our students know what we think they know? How can we ask them to demonstrate learning to us? It's really at the core of what we do. And so to have such a big change, seemingly out of the blue, that ask such big existential questions about our profession, I think is the reason why we're seeing so much energy and emotions around this technology. So having framed that, what I'd like to do is just talk about what we'll do in this introductory session today, because this really is a kickoff, I think, to a much broader conversation that we'll be having both in our UMB community and the much wider circles of higher ed in general. So today we just want to talk a little bit about, like, what is this? What is AI? What is ChatGPT? How does it work? I'm going to show you a demo of it. And then broaden our thinking to some of these bigger questions. How does this technology have the potential to impact our educational practice? What might we need to reimagine as a result of it? And it's changing every day, and it's, you know, like it's just so new that we're just all figuring this out together. And so we would like to hear from you also as part of this. We want to know what questions you're wrestling with, what things are top of mind as we begin. And to do that, I'd invite you to share that in the chat right now to that first question, kind of just at first glance, first pass, based on what you've heard about in these last couple of months. What's on your mind? What questions are you wrestling with? The second question that we'd like to explore together with you in this community is what can be done to support faculty as we navigate this landscape together. And to that end, we're going to have some breakout rooms later in the session where we're going to ask you to share out how you think UMB, the FCTL, the Writing Center, other institutions on campus, how we can support you as we explore this together. So for now, what are you wrestling with? And if I have a hard time seeing the chat when I'm on two screens, so if someone, Michelle or Isabel, could maybe summarize what you're seeing.
While I'm waiting, I think folks are typing. I put something in that I'm concerned about, but you know, I'll talk more about that later.
Right.
Thoughts on restructuring writing assignments? Yes, Glenn, as a writing instructor and being trained in writing pedagogy, absolutely. That is definitely a super big, I mean, it's a huge topic. Yes. Can we integrate ChatGPT into our course that students are actually using this? Good question. We'll talk a little bit about some of the proprietary things and still developing their own critical teaching skills. I think that is, who put this in there?
Is that
Tom, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's what a lot of folks I see a lot of folks debating, like, how do we balance that? Effects on attribution and scholarship. Yeah, so there's the teaching part. We talked about this yesterday with Michelle, copyright issues, like plagiarism looms in this conversation, which we'll address some of that. Yeah, those are all, let me see, Christina was here. I see Karen, I think, posted something. My chat.
Students will know more about it than I will. Such an important point. I've already lost the name of who that was, but yes.
Katie, that's right. Katie, you're right.
Yeah.
And then Neil, will there be ChatGPT AI enhancements that serve as tools for the teacher? You know what, Neil? Who knows? Probably yes. I mean, people want to monetize this. Has Pandora's box been opened, Karen? You know, and I think there's a concern. How quick do we need to be? Can we even adapt this quickly? What does it look institutionally for us as faculty, as adjunct, whatever our roles are? Absolutely. Usefulness for scholarly research. So I like the way you framed it, Kevin. Like, it might be some usefulness, sophistication. Yeah. So those are all great points. And we'll touch upon all of those. Erin, do you want to actually show what it looks like?
Yeah, let's take a look at it. I don't know, maybe just if you want to use the raise hand feature, if anyone's had a chance to play with it yet. It can be tricky to get an account, and even when you get an account, sometimes the servers can lag. They can be at capacity during this trial phase. So what I've done is I've recorded a film, a movie film, listen to me, a film of me using ChatGPT that I would like to show you. But before I play it, this is the interface. So can everyone see my screen okay? So this is just a YouTube recording of me playing around on ChatGPT with an eye toward this presentation. You can see the interface is very simple. It's very clean. Again, the caveat for everything is right now, at this moment. It'll give you some examples of ideas you can put in there as a prompt. The prompt window is down here. It talks about its capabilities. I think the first one being the most interesting, that it can remember what was said earlier in the chat conversation. So it feels much more conversational than a Google search might. And you can specify the prompts that you give, and you can get more detailed and ask it to refine its answers as you move forward. It's also pretty transparent about its limitations. I think this is interesting. It may occasionally generate incorrect information. We're going to talk about that. It is subject to bias and harmful instructions occasionally. And its knowledge of the world is limited. And this has to do with the way that it has been fed the information it has. We'll talk about this a little later, but I think something important to know about this tool in particular is that it is not trawling the internet to provide these answers. And that's why it says right now that its knowledge of the world is limited, because while it has been fed websites, I think of it as like this monster just getting machine information. It has been given websites as part of its training. But it is not crawling the internet. So if you have updated your website recently, it's not necessarily going to find that information until its next wave of information. So it is pulling from the information and using algorithms to create answers, but it is not a search engine. It is not looking live on the internet as it's producing its answers. So with that said, I'm going to play the video and I'm going to show you the first prompt I put in there. And I'm asking it to craft an email. So we're playing this quickly.
And just FYI, she's playing it, Erin is playing this at double speed, or 1.75.
Yes.
It's a little faster than the actual interaction would look like, just to
Yes.
give you an accurate idea of the speed.
Yes, although it is pretty fast
when
the server is not lagged. So I'm asking it to generate an email inviting faculty to a session just like this one. So you can see it does this pretty well. And it gives me a starting point, right? If I were inviting you to something, I might take this as a start, fill in the blanks, tweak it, maybe try to personalize it a little bit more to our context, but it quickly gives me something to work with. I also think it's funny when I watch this video that I've asked it everything I ask it, I have to use the word please. Like I can't get my head around that, that this is not a human responding to this. So I just think that's interesting. So now I'm asking it to create an agenda for the session today. So it's giving me times for things. It's telling me what I might do in those windows. It's got a flow that makes sense to me. If I were doing a session like this, I might not want the full 2 hours. So I might take what it gives me here and tweak it and refine it and think, oh, I'd like to replace X with Y, but it does give me a really solid starting place to think about a session. So keeping my educator, my faculty hat on, the next request I'm going to give it is to help me think out some learning objectives for a course like we might see here at UMB's graduate school. So I'm asking it for 5 learning objectives for a graduate level unit. I'm rethinking myself here on motivational interviewing in a course on integrative health and wellness like Michelle might teach. And it quickly comes up with 5 really good learning objectives, right? And if based on the formulas, Isabel and I have talked about, the writing of learning objectives can sometimes feel formulaic. There is a structure to it. So it's clear that this system has received the kind of information it needs to spit those back at me using the topic of motivational interviewing, which is something else it has received information on. So, again, a great starting point, maybe something I would discuss with a professor. What do you think about this? Does this really apply? Is this the level of accuracy you want? Do we even need to measure it in that way? Whatever it might be. But again, something very quickly to work from. So now I am going to ask it, again, politely, to design an assessment around one of these objectives. And I think I specify objective 4. So this is the one about self-reflection and peer feedback. And it's going to crank out something that I think could be workable, depending on the context of the type of class that I'm teaching, whether I'm online, in person, I'd have to think about that. But some things to think about for sure. So now, I've got this as my educator's hat on, and I could see some potentially useful applications to me of things. Not going to take it just as is. Definitely going to tweak it, think about it, discuss it with my colleagues, but something to start with. So that's my assessment. And now I'm asking it to give me some ideas for discussion board prompts, right? Looking at motivational interviewing and health behavior change gives me, 3 questions. Right? Again, something to work with. Now I'm going to think about the student, and I'm putting in one of these particular prompts and I'm asking it to respond. I'm going to pause here so I can talk about this. I'm asking it to create a response for this. So now we're starting to think about how might a student use something like this. So they're giving a discussion prompt, they're given that, they put it in. And this is a personal one. Describe a challenge or barrier you have encountered when using motivational interviewing. So it's going to answer, you see it changed it to the first person, right? And it's answering this as though it had experience using motivational interviewing with a client or a patient, and talking about future plans. So this gets interesting, right? Because clearly this machine has not done this. And the fact that it's using the first person pretty convincingly. But I think when you also look at the writing here, you can see that there's missing some details, like it doesn't exactly pop off the page. It feels a little generic, a little flat, because there can be no true personal experience integrated in here because it was not written by someone who could have had that personal experience. So I thought that was kind of an interesting observation around that. So now we're going to give it another prompt. Now I'm asking it to include citations. Right? A lot of questions about attribution, citations, plagiarism here. So it's coming up with a response that includes citations. And I looked those up, and 2 out of the 3 are accurate. This book exists, the Miller and Rolnick book exists, the Institute of Medicine. This Krebs couldn't find it anywhere. Couldn't find it in our library, Google Scholar, and it is known to produce just fake citations. I read another example where someone was using it in a diagnostic setting. So it put in some information about a patient. It came out with making a connection between oral contraceptives and a particular health outcome. And the person writing the article said there's no evidence in the literature of a connection between these. So it asked ChatGPT to provide that reference, that citation, and it was real scholars' names and a real journal, but they just made up the title. So, definitely some caveats and things to consider as we're thinking about the usefulness and the applicability of that. So now that we've seen it, let's step back a little bit and kind of talk about what it is and a bit about how it works. And for that, I will turn things over to Isabell.
Gladly. So very briefly, I'm not going to talk too much about the slide. Erin and I put these in really for you to look at later. Michelle will do a follow-up email to everyone. So you can see these things in greater detail, look at the sources. But right, AI is artificial intelligence. I think, that's the abbreviation for it. We live in the world of acronyms. What we wanted to point out with this slide really is to really make us aware that we live in a world that has integrated artificial intelligence for actually a very long time. Yes, it does feel like the meteor is coming to us. And I think, isn't there a movie called Impact or whatever it was about a meteor coming? That's sort of how I've been feeling at times. And at times I'm very like, oh, this will just all work itself out and it's a great tool. And right, that tension, I think probably many of us have experienced or experiencing. And I certainly saw those in some of the initial comments that thoughts that people had right at the beginning. So just, there's a short table here just to emphasize again, AI is really something that has been integrated into our life, and it might feel very sudden to us how ChatGPT came about, but it has been in the works for a long time. But I think seeing it in action makes it so tangible, and so I find it's very intense. And so the way that ChatGPT, I'm terrible with acronyms. ChatGPT is what people call a large language model, right? So it's or generative pre-training transformer, which is what the abbreviation stands for. The current version is 3.5. There is another version in the works that's called ChatGPT Pro. I'll talk about it in a moment. But it's this conversational. It's like you're talking to another person. I don't know if any of you had ever experienced this when you're working with an insurance, and rather than being on the phone forever, you can go on the chatbot. I've certainly done that. And there's limitations to those conversations. You can't have the most complex conversations with a chatbot that's designed to help you make sure you pay your bills or you can change your insurance. And ChatGPT, therefore, has also limits. But it does adapt fairly quickly. It is written in a mathematical formula, from what I understand. So many of you might know a lot more about this, that can adapt. And it is fed, I think the original data was about 570 gigabytes of data were fed. And as Erin said, it's important to know that it's not a search engine. It is not actively Googling information. It is using old information, at least at this point. Who knows what the next version will look like, but that's what we're dealing with the current version that many of us already have access to, that we can access for free. And so this language model, it's what is interesting about it, it has also been programmed to not give you inappropriate responses. Like the example here is like, how do I build a bomb? And there are sometimes responses I've tried to carve questions out around sort of equity and racism, and it kind of goes in different direction, has different comments to make it somewhat like, I am not trained to comment on this, but if I were to write this is, so there is some human brain behind this, right? Obviously, that has put certain barriers in there. But some of the dangers, I think, that some folks have pointed out, if you can do that, you can also program a chatbot to be only giving you answers that are leaning in a particular sort of ideological direction. So that is always the danger with any of these technologies. But that's basically what ChatGPT is and what it can do. And so Erin and I thought, so there's the tension between these two reactions, like, oh my God, catastrophe, death of writing, the end of books. Where's the safer sign? How can we control it? How do I know who's written a ChatGPT essay and who didn't? Blah, blah, blah. And I say blah, 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 not to be glib, but it's a lot to process. And I think it's a perfectly normal reaction to have. And so here are some of the things like, sure, it looks like it's a catastrophe, but, and Erin is gonna, there you go. So, and this question has come up, and folks have asked this of me and James in particular, as working in the writing center, having a background in writing pedagogy and writing assessment. Technically, using ChatGPT per se isn't not necessarily plagiarism. What really is the crux, I think, what I find, and what a lot of our colleagues in writing pedagogy assessment agree, it's an issue around how to use it and of information literacy. Is it possible to put in an essay prompt and get an essay? Obviously, we've seen it. Do they look flat? Some of them do. It depends on how, what kinds of writing assignments and prompts we're giving students, and how easily they can be manipulated or spit out by a program like ChatGPT. But it isn't necessarily, if somebody uses a chatbot like ChatGPT, doesn't necessarily mean they automatically plagiarize. And I think we'll talk more about some of the resources we'll have for you later. A lot of folks right now are grappling with, how do we then integrate it? What do I allow students to do within and what not? And there aren't any like answers that will fit everybody's context, right? I think that's really important to know. So it's not a catastrophe, it's just a situation that we have to address and constantly negotiate. Can you do the next one, Erin? So the other thing that I've heard a lot of folks ask me about is like, well, or also there is, I think, something developed by a student at Stanford University, if I'm not mistaken, like a ChatGPT detector that sort of works. But I was following a Twitter feed this morning. It's my morning activity. So when I drop off my son, I go on Twitter for about 10 minutes to kind of take I don't know, just for my own enjoyment. And there was a Twitter, whole tweet conversation going on around, that sometimes it happened in a situation, somebody submitted an essay and the instructor ran it through this detector, and the detector said this has been generated by an AI, and it actually genuinely hasn't. And somebody put in, I think, a part of Macbeth, and ChatGPT told the person, this has been generated by a chatbot. So there are flaws to these detecting mechanisms, and ultimately we're always going to be behind in them. It's like this arms race. I love the way that Erin phrased it, that we cannot possibly win because the technology is always going to be faster than us. So I don't think the solution is let's just get software that detects these essays written by ChatGPT, because that is not really possible. So there must be other ways, right, that we can prevent, that we can teach our students and ourselves to use it responsibly. So it's really about, and this is of course an area I'm very passionate about, and around writing in particular, but it's more than just writing assignments. But what kinds of assignments are we designing? How does ChatGPT force us to really come to terms with what are we using assignments, especially larger writing assignments is what I often deal with. Are we using it to assess learning, or are we also teaching our students to write and look at writing as a process? So I think the more sophisticated and specialized our texts are getting, the harder it will be for ChatGPT at this point to really kind of just spit them out and sound like they were written by a person who has knowledge in this. And I've tried this yesterday with some of my writing assignments, and I've gotten some citations. They were correct, but they really didn't fit the assignment. Just somehow there was a keyword that was similar. So, right, the algorithm, the mathematical formula pulled them out. But, there is more depth to that. And I think so the question is, are we just focusing on product, particularly for writing assignment, or are we also interested in the process? And if we're interested in the process, how can ChatGPT actually be a tool? So I hear a lot of folks talk about ChatGPT not as like this drama for plagiarism, the end of the world is over, but how is it a tool that we can work for us and use to teach our students? You want to go to the next slide, Erin?
Well, just there's this one more point too, that this
There's one more. Sorry
technology.
about this, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So I can't have trouble seeing it because
Yeah, so really just recognizing that
yeah.
this tool is already part of our professional landscape, right? People are starting to think about how can I use this to help craft emails. You saw me use it as part of my professional work earlier. It's going to be part of the healthcare landscape. There have been articles written about how this can help doctors draft emails to insurance companies, asking them to consider paying for particular treatments that might not be part of the typical standard of care, that kind of thing. So I think recognizing that this isn't just a tool that people are going to be using to shortcut education, right? If that's our concern, that it's going to be part of our professional landscapes, and it's important for us to kind of reckon with it, and with that in mind as well. So
there was a question about cost. I think, Erin, you're going to cover that in your next slide.
Yes,
so Andrea,
yes,
tight.
that's an ever-changing thing too. So thank you, Isabell. So we, again, on that one part of the spectrum, that kind of reactionary response, right, from the skeptics. I also think we need to be cautious about being very quick to adopt it in a very open, kind of less than thoughtful way. This is amazing, it's revolutionary, I'm going to require it in all my courses. It can be exciting, right? I think there's some interesting applications for it, but I also think there's some considerations we need to be mindful of on this end of the spectrum as well. First of all, as we've talked about, it can produce incorrect and or biased information, but make it sound really, really good. So I think that's something that we need to be mindful of, to that point of information literacy. We need to make sure our students are mindful of it as well. One of the resources we've provided takes you to a Google Doc where people are sharing their syllabus statements around the use of ChatGPT and AI. And these are like hot off the presses, the way different people are thinking about it in all kinds of fields, all kinds of higher ed institutions. And several of them say something like, while I will allow the use of ChatGPT in these certain contexts and for these certain kinds of activities, ultimately, what you put in your document, you are responsible for. So if ChatGPT is giving you something that you're then integrating, but that information is biased or incorrect, it is still on you as the learner to be responsible for whatever information you have.
Erin,
so
just a
it's
quick time check. It's 12:33 because I know we want to get
okay.
folks in groups soon.
Yeah. Yep. It can struggle with citations. We've seen that, creating fictional sources. It can be hard to get an account right now. And you can never guarantee that you can log on at a particular time, because if the server is overloaded, it won't let you on. So you can't plan for it as part of a live class activity. Eventually, it will likely be under a paywall. They've just announced a $20 a month subscription, and there are no institutional licenses as of now. So it's not like Blackboard, where we manage our privacy and data and security concerns through our institutional contract with Blackboard. Nothing like that exists right now. And students, you have to put in your actual telephone number, and it can't be like a VoIP line or anything like that. It has to be a cell phone. What are they doing with that? Anybody's guess, right? Not nothing. So be mindful of that, the equity and the privacy concerns. Some of your students may not want to use it for these reasons. So here's what we would like to do. We would like to invite you to join groups. Michelle's going to organize that for us, of about 4 to 5 people. And our questions really are, our question is this: we're acknowledging that as we think about the impact of this technology on your teaching, you might feel the need for further support. And so we would like you to discuss in your small groups what the institution can do, what kind of support you need as we navigate this landscape together. So we're going to have you talk for about 10 minutes about the kind of support that you might like. And if you could please designate one person who could then share that out with us when we come back in about, what do you think, Michelle, about 10 minutes?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I've got the rooms ready. So
and I pasted the question in the chat, so folks might want to maybe copy and paste it so you have it. I don't know if it always transfers in, it might transfer into the groups, I'm not sure, but it's now in the chat, so just you have it there as well if you want to just do a quick copy and then paste it in your group.
Super.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got 11 rooms and I'm going to send you all there now. And actually we're having a few people drop off. I'm nervous about going in the rooms, I guess. So I'm going to open the rooms and we will come back at 12:45.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have only a small amount of time. We have a small amount of time only, and we want to make sure we hear as many voices as possible. So be mindful. Maybe take a minute or so to report. Feel also free to use the chat. So if we don't get to your group or you're just better with chat anyway, please use the chat to report back to us, so to speak, any thoughts, any discussions you've had. We'd love to capture as much of that as possible.
Yeah. So who'd like to kick us off? What's on your mind, and how can we support? Yeah. Hi, Glenn.
Hey, what's up? Good group. So I'll put this out there. We talked about how there might be more of a divide between those of us on the call that truly value critical thinking and try to incorporate that into our teaching, and ChatGPT kind of widening that divide for all the other faculty instructors that are just trying to get content out on a screen, on a lecture screen, and probably send that over to students. And then also there might be this idea in educational approach for professional schools that writing may not be as important, and that this refocuses it on its importance and the ability to write critically, creatively, and develop those skills. So it's maybe not so much necessarily the content and the outcome, but are we teaching the skills and assessing the skills to be creative as opposed to what they're actually putting down?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Such important points. Who else would like to?
Can I just ask, it would be great to have a list of these key questions that we can return to. I don't know how to do that, but you've got it recorded. So I think it'd be fascinating.
Yeah.
Erin, I put it in the chat, but I think one of the things that we talked about, it'd be great to have like a team putting together worked examples of best practices. Because I think as faculty, we're bombarded with so many different tools and techniques and strategies, and it'd be nice for a team, like this is their emphasis. Like they're looking into and they're evaluating AI integration, grounded in best educational practice, and then they're distributing their knowledge to the larger faculty.
That's a great point, Erin. Karen. That's a great point. And some of the resources that we have on our last slide, I will show at the end, and that will be made available to you, is a collection of people's practices they're currently working with. I think we haven't seen any research output yet, like measuring what, what does it actually do? How does it compare? I think we'll see more and more of that. But there have been some studies, I can't think of, but I have a list somewhere, but that have been done on similar or slightly different AI technologies in writing and in other contexts, and how they compare. And so there is already a little bit of knowledge out there, but I think with ChatGPT, it's growing. But I think we had talked about, Erin, to, create maybe some sort of repository website or subsite, either on the faculty centers and also the writing centers for writing assessment, and link those. So that's in the works,
Yep.
I think.
Yeah. Who else would like to share? Yeah, Mark. Hi.
Hi. I just a few things that resonated in our group. One of the participants said, "We're moving further away from being human," which is a shame these days. One of the concerns is making sure that the campus or SITs or any group on campus that knows this material very, very well keeps us all up to date. If each of us is responsible for keeping up to date with the pluses and advantages and disadvantages of this software, we're all going to be lost. So having information regularly posted, these are things that we need you to worry about, need to think about. Worked examples, I thought, was an excellent suggestion, Karen. So that was one of our concerns. The other was that, unfortunately, if someone on campus is responsible for this, they're going to have to really keep up with the changing landscape. There were a couple of examples that were used in writing, where someone in medicine might be relying on ChatGPT, but because it's older data, they're using professional guidelines that might not be current anymore.
Right.
Likewise, with the technology, we really have to be ahead of the game to deal with any problems that might be encountered. So there were a few other things, but I think those were the most important.
That's an important mark, and I do want to add to that, because I think Erin's and my centers are often put in the position to be those places. And frankly, it's going to be very difficult for us to be that one place. So and not just because we don't, it's a huge job, but on top of, so we can do what we can. But on top of that, I think what is needed is something even larger. Like, I think we actually do need the input from folks in the different disciplines, because how ChatGPT may or may not be integrated really varies on the educational context. So, but I agree with you, Mark. We need to have some sort of way to organize ourselves around it. And, it's a good plug for the higher ups that we need some sort of task force working group probably around this, with input from a lot of campus players.
Yeah.
I just want to add the word like vetted, right? And so I think that's the other thing, is the time it takes to vet that you are actually looking at a good quality resource. So the speed of this is happening so fast. That's the other reason I'd love to have a task force that's dedicated to this, because the speed of the information and the quantity of the information is overwhelming, and I think your time is broken down in so many different chunks as a faculty member. Like, this is just a really small component of like our day-to-day life in some ways. So that's the second part, like not just the work examples and the best practices, but a group of people that have the skill set to vet what I should actually be spending my time reading and looking at in some ways.
Is that partially field specific, do you think, like between pharmacy and social work?
Yep.
Agreed. It could be. It could be. And I think, just real quick to build on Mark's point about the humanity of it, I think this is where the humanity comes in, right? Is that we have to kind of link arms and navigate this together interdisciplinarily, interprofessionally. I think it's I'm a humanities person, so I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the humanities, because there will be things now that we will value in outputs that are essentially more human, right? Because it can't be done by something like that. So, maybe even just kind of a infrequent sort of heady conversation about some of these things might be interesting as well. other groups want to share out? What kind of supports? Yes, Mr. Conroy, Mr. Conroy. Oh, I think you're still muted.
Thanks for
Yes.
that. And yeah, so as far as humanity is concerned, I know that this has been kind of equated to when calculators came out, right? So calculators, everybody knew the numbers, they knew the process, they knew what symbols to go ahead and hit, but they still needed to understand why they needed to put those numbers in. And as I look at this, we're still asking the questions, right? And so from an education standpoint, we can now ask the folks to say, hey, what questions are you going to go ahead and ask, and then go ahead and give us information about it. So yeah, it was a pretty good discussion that I had with my group. Me from my background, it's not going to have as much of an impact initially, but the other folks in the School of Law thought it might have a great impact because of their need for writing and use of words and so forth. So that's all I had for that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Any other group want to report out?
I could do for group 9. So we had a couple of interesting points that I'll share. One was that a way of encouraging students to think in a way that contributes to the overall understanding is to have them answer, it could be with ChatGPT, component questions that they then have to go back and integrate. Now, ultimately, I'm sure there'll be AI that will take component answers and integrate it, but at least at the present, that's a way of students actually contributing. But the bigger question is not just in the student context, but for the professionals that we train, how do they assess the ChatGPT output in a critical way so that they're actually being effective? And you can imagine, just as you showed missteps with references, in a clinical context, you could get really unfortunate recommendations out of AI that are not actually optimal.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, that idea back to process, right? And that stepwise process that you were describing. And I think it also taps into, I read a quote that said, AI will never be able to teach someone how to ski or how to play the guitar. And it's not because that's a physical activity. It's because if you are intrinsically interested in learning a task like that, then you're going to be motivated to go through the processes that you need to learn it. So I think it also taps into relevance and connecting with students with the why we're assigning certain things or why we're asking them to do things in a certain way once we've reflected on that ourselves. So,
And if I may add to that, also, I totally agree, Erin. And also, how are we going about teaching them what they do? And I think of writing in particular, because I think this is really questioning or putting, for some of us who use writing as a form of assessment, to really take a hard look at what exactly are we doing with our writing assignments? Are there actually, because if ChatGPT can answer them for us, then maybe we need to rethink aspects of that assignment or of the path towards the assignment. And I think that's, there's a lot of process-oriented writing instruction that's also very equitable. And so there was a lot of research in this area that I think can become extremely useful for us to get into this. And it's really about, we talked about this yesterday, AI is sort of a black box. It can't tell you why it's selecting something, but humans usually can, right? I mean, that's a big part of our teaching. And I know certainly of myself and hopefully teaching my students is in the why do I choose X over Y, and why did I go this to why did I choose this? And that is something that currently, at least, ChatGPT and other AIs can't really tell you. They're just trained to reproduce, but not really rationalize why. And I think, and if we emphasize that in our teaching, and ChatGPT then becomes a tool to help our students develop that skills, I think that's what many of you are saying. I think it actually can be very useful.
And I see
Erin,
Karen has her hand raised. Hi, Karen.
Yeah, hi, thank you. And I was in with Tom in that group. And one thought I had was recognizing that, okay, they go through their process, they go through their program, they graduate, they pass their license, and all of a sudden they're hit with making a massive decision instantaneously. They can't necessarily pull their smartphone up and ask
ChatGPT.
program for the answer.
Well, I have to
They
leave
have
it,
to
but I
have
wanted to
enough-
share.
Huh?
I'd like to share one idea, which is that in my own teaching, I've relied increasingly over the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years on students generating cartoons, logical cartoons to supplement writing and often to precede written descriptions. And I think that that's an interesting idea if it could be adapted, because if students can graphically represent their thinking, that's a very different way of expressing or understanding the logic that would, in a sense, complement, but also provide a critical alternative to just what comes out of AI.
I think Erin has
Yes.
one last slide to show us, right?
I do, but just beforehand, just I want to thank everyone so much for your participation in these ideas. Clearly, we are just getting started. I think today was the linking of the arms and the the recognition that we are in this together and that we can only tackle this, by coming together in this very human way to explore this. So thank you. Please stay tuned for more information. We might be sending out another follow-up survey to get some more ideas about where we could take this next. But just in terms of a closing thought, given where we are and how new this is and how novel, I just want to just leave you with a few things of ways we might be able to respond right now, given this very quickly changing landscape. One is just to experiment, see what the tool can do, think about what it might be able to do years from now, how it can change and just play around with it. And then also to reflect. We've talked about this a lot. Why am I assigning what I assign? How will I know if they're learning? Is there a way I can rethink it, reimagine it, or just explain this rationale to students so that they understand why it's important that they do it and not ChatGPT, if you feel strongly that that's the case. Collaborating. Really important to collaborate and include the students, right? Include the students. What are they saying about this? How are they experiencing it? How are they engaging with it? What questions and concerns do they have? They are partners in this with us. And then to communicate that, to be transparent, even as your own understanding and your philosophy evolves about its use, but to be transparent about your expectations in your courses. And we have, as I said, a link to some language you might consider. There are no official policies as of yet at the system level. So we're not at the policy phase. I think we're in the philosophy phase of this, and certainly the representatives from my center, Isabell's center, are happy to think this out, as part of a broader conversation.
Can I make a shameless plug, Erin? I put a link in the chat. We created a faculty reading and journal club, and it's focused on sort of equitable approaches towards integrating writing in graduate classrooms in health, science, and human services. We will have a session on AI language technologies. I believe it's later on this year. But, I encourage everyone to join us, because we are talking about, just in general, how do we best, and this is really focused on writing assessment and writing, teaching with writing and teaching writing. So check it out. Any questions you have, feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And it's part of that communication collaboration. Just wanted to put that out there.
So thank you so much, Erin, Isabell. I realized we were right at 1 o'clock, so I want to honor everyone's time. I did type into ChatGPT and asked it to say a thank you to our presenters. So I thought it'd be fun to read that to you. This is what ChatGPT says to you, Isabell and Erin. I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude to our presenters today. Your insightful and informative presentation on ChatGPT was truly impressive, and your passion for the subject was evident. Your contributions are invaluable, and I want to thank you both for taking the time to share your knowledge with us. Thank you so much.
It's listening in, Michelle.
A better thank you that I could do. So, and just to plug, so thank you all, many new faces. This is the online teaching community sponsored by the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. We meet once a month. I will be sending a follow-up email with some of these resources that Isabell and Erin have shared. Our next meeting is on March 3rd, and it's actually Erin Hagar will be presenting again. And she will be talking about designing and implementing group work in an online classroom. So if you haven't already got the Zoom invites from me, email me personally. That will be in your follow-up email, and I will send you those Zoom invites. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Isabell and Erin, and have a wonderful month. Bye.
Thanks,
all.
Michelle, for
Thank
having
you
us.
all.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.